Welcome to another episode of Moonshots. As you know, every week we bring you amazing guests with audacious ideas. This is what we call moonshots. These people are not only thinking big, they are doing big. And they are here to tell you what is it that they care about, they're willing to dedicate their life to. But more than that, give you the wisdom so you can find your moonshot and you can go out and execute on your moonshot. And today's episode is absolutely no difference. And today I bring you Chad. So Chad, what is your moonshot?
My moonshot is to one day run a social venture that impacts like hundreds of millions of people. And what I really believe that I'm doing today is really beginning to build that foundation so that it's possible. Because I think many people, there's actually few people that think beyond 100 years, right? I think often we think about our lives and, after 100 years, we're going to be dead. But for me, it's like, let's think about beyond 100 years. Let's think about higher level paradigms and where we can sort of affect these people to really bring about a lot of value and change in a beneficial way.
Wow. So why hundreds of millions? Why not billions?
Actually, I would love billions.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just thinking too small. Hundreds of millions. Billions is great. Right. Billions is awesome.
So great. So billions of people, you're going to change their life. How are you going to change their life?
Absolutely. So, I sort of think about passion and what you identify that you're good at. So there's like four types of people that I believe, right? Yeah. So the first type are people that, unfortunately, they never really figure out what they're good at and they never figure out what their passion is. And that's really a sad thing. The second type of people, they figure out what they're really good at and, that makes them a lot of money and they become affluent. The third type of person, they figure out what their passion is, but they unfortunately can't really convert that into something that's financially viable. Mm-hmm. And the fourth type of person that I see is, one that sort of grows up and they figure out their passion and also what they're really good at. And that's very unique. So for myself, I've begun to really figure out what I'm really good at in life. And what my objective is to get to a point where I fully own my time so I could really identify what my passion is. And, my passion, I've already sort of, seen glimpses of it. And it's really to run a social venture. I've done it in the past, and then I sort of hit some brick walls. And now I sort of see that I really need to build that base upon what I'm doing today in conversational AI.
So what are you good at?
What am I good at? So I found what I'm good at is really fostering community. It's really bringing people together with a common idea, common objective, and having different discussions, having diverse discussions, talking about different insights, and really bringing the best practices to light. And, I've done this several times out here in Seattle. We started the Chatbot and Voice Meetup. We scaled it to 1,000 people within like a year and a half, and it's been incredible. And we also started the podcast as well to really be able to interview people from around the world that are also just as passionate about conversational AI. And I really believe, the more disparate and different and diverse viewpoints you can get, ultimately the more accurate the data that you're going to get and hopefully bring about different trends that you can decipher from that data.
I think you're going, so to some extent, what is this conversational AI and what is the purpose of it and what would you get?
Sure.
So you get millions of people to have this diverse data. What is the purpose? Why?
Yeah, so like if we think about humans' interaction with computer systems and we go all the way back to punch cards, right? That is a very complex way for people to interact with computer systems. Mainframe computer systems come about. Then we begin to have command line interfaces, but still, that is reserved for like a few, select few of people that can really understand how to interact with computer systems. And then we got graphical user interfaces and it was a little bit easier, but still it's not innate. And now we finally come to a turning point where the human is not the onus is not really on them to figure out how to use the computer system, but the computer system has begun to, even in a simplified way, understand the human. So if we think about what that does, that gives the same computing power that a 10-year-old can have in the same way that a 70-year-old could have that. And that is purely transformational in the way that I see things.
But today, we know people can't even communicate with other people, let alone with a computer. So you think somehow the computers are going to be better understanding us than our spouses are?
That's a really good point. So, I think that's always sort of like the middle ground, right? With technology, as well as what sort of value we can get out of it, right? Because I certainly see, there are things such as like people getting addicted to social media, and it's like, okay, well, where do we draw the line there? So I certainly think we need to continue to have discussions around, okay, well, where does the benefit start and where does it end? So a good example of that is many people think conversational AI, it's going to take over customer support. But what we see today, in fact, is the fact that people actually have better morale in customer support centers where they're using conversational AI. Because think about, just imagine for a second, you sit in a customer support center. Probably like 20% of the questions you answer, you have to answer them every single day, right? It's like these very simple questions that are probably boring the crap out of your mind. And now we can take those off your plate. And now those people can focus on more complex.
But Chad, think for a second here. You're thinking from a customer service, the person who's providing customer service. You're forgetting the person who is a customer. When was the last time you picked up the phone? On the other end, there is a voicemail who is a conversation AI. So what seems to be the problem? And you're thinking, I just need the damn operator. I need the human. I want to tell them what my problem is. I want to be able to explain what happened. And you keep asking me the same damn question 15 times. Do you want to select 1 for this, 2 for this? Please just get me the operator. So are you telling me somehow now that this AI is going to be so good that I would never say press operator?
The technology is certainly getting to a point that is much better than the IVR systems that I think you're talking about here. Because I think everyone remembers how painful those things are and we all hate them. So technology today is getting to a point where it is becoming much better, where the computer is understanding more nuanced components of speech. So we can sort of more naturally have this conversation and get to what we're trying to achieve much quicker. And that is becoming a real reality today. Far beyond the press 1, press 2, press 3 of the IVRs.
But I'm not saying press 1, press 2, press 3. But let's assume even if it is, how do I explain the circumstances? Well, I know I made a mistake and what happened is here. And the human being say, oh, I get it.
Right.
Would the computer say, oh, I get it?
As far as
the whole context of what really happened, why I'm asking for a refund or why I'm asking for you to repair the phone that I actually did drop and did break.
Yeah, so that's a huge component. It's like number 1, the computer understanding, but number 2, and this is what a lot of people in our space are talking about, it's making sure the computer also shows a degree of empathy, because that's hugely important. So a big a statement that I heard in this space is that conversational AI, the objective is to take the robot out of the human. Because if you think about call centers, they become quite robotic, right? Even though there are humans at the end, you don't feel like there's any relationship being facilitated over it. It's just...
You must not be buying the right products, dude, because when I talk to people, they seem to be very friendly, very cool.
Yeah, so maybe I'm not. What brands are you buying products from?
Anyway, my point is, yes, I do understand what you're saying, but I was thinking about... Generally, you go to Nordstrom. You never see a robot on the other end. You really talk to a person who cares, right? And you talk about empathy being in AI. Isn't that what makes human a human? You thinking suddenly that AI can have the empathy or it can somehow fake empathy?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question you're posing, right? So the humans are building AI. So the thinking would be that hopefully the humans, interject the empathy into the models that they're building. And that's slowly what we're beginning to see, right? It's not perfect, right? So to a certain extent, it is being faked. So I certainly agree with you. But I think the trajectory that I see things going, AI is going to get to a place.
But we don't understand how it works. The fact that, you think about the human, we don't understand these metaphysical concepts that we have, the jealousy, love, anger, empathy. How can these metaphysical things be produced by things that are physical, and the physicals are biochemicals or the bits? And can you really have the bits and bits and bytes or physical chemicals and electricity and create this metaphysical concept of anger and empathy? We don't understand how that happens in humans today.
That's a really good point. And I guess another way of looking at it too is like, should we be doing that in the first place?
But forget the should part. Point is, we don't even understand how it happens in human. So how can we create that in AI?
Yeah, I think just looking at customer service transcripts and how they train their employees, or similar with sales. I still think we can extract specific ways that we interject empathy during those conversations. And to a certain extent, we can put those into these models that we're building when they facilitate communication with humans. You make a good point. We don't fully understand at like a neurochemical level how those things really manifest themselves in humans. But I think to a certain extent, we can emulate a certain, component to them. I don't think they ever will be completely, one-to-one parity. They may in fact be, but who knows at this point.
But don't you feel cheated when someone on the other end tells you, oh, I understand, and the guy doesn't have a clue about understanding what you're going through? It makes you even feel worse when a computer tells you, oh, Chad, I understand what you're going through. It's like, just shut up.
I agree. Like, there are quite a few bad bot experiences. Like, I'm not saying that they're completely perfect today. And I think it's also maybe good to perhaps delineate, different types of conversational AI, right? I think in certain circumstances, you just want stuff to work, right? It's like, I have this problem. I don't want to wait 15 minutes on the phone. If I could just message something and it says, Chad, we fixed it already. It's great. I think that's one circumstance where you're not necessarily looking for empathy, perhaps maybe a little bit, right? That it says, I understand you're having this problem, but if it can solve my issue, that's very utilitarian, right? Yeah. Now, on the other hand, there are like a different form of conversational AI. I think maybe the best case, or maybe an infamous case, was Tay from Microsoft. Yeah. We saw that sort of explode. Now, the one that Microsoft built in China is called Xiao Ice, right? Now, these are sort of more personality-driven bots where people can have more natural conversations, right? And it's gotten so good in China that these bots have actually won poetry competitions. So if we're to use that as some benchmark, perhaps maybe we're not able to totally, copy the way that humans interact on an emotional level, but we're getting to a certain extent.
Of course. AI will be able to produce music that only Mozart could do. So my point is, AI is going to be able to do a lot of the things, but to some extent they are built and learned from what humans did.
Right.
But how do you create something fundamentally so creative that humans hasn't thought about it yet? And how do you create that first thing someone say, wow, that was cool?
Yeah, no, I completely see where you're coming from. And certainly conversational AI is not there yet, right? It's not generating these conversations, out of thin air on their own, right? I think most of us that are idealists believe at a certain point, computer systems and AI will be able to generate things that are far outside our scope of concern. It's almost like the analogy they use of like an ant, right? We don't often bend down and talk to the ant. And similarly, the future of AI or AGIs, are we to believe that perhaps the scope of their concern is even much larger than the way that we're thinking about things? So I certainly agree with you that, maybe that's a trajectory we're going, but today, humans are still training these conversational AI.
But I was thinking, even humans, do we really even have intelligence? Forget about, this whole idea of artificial intelligence.
Right.
Somehow it makes you think that humans somehow have this real intelligence and this is artificial.
Right.
Or one could argue someday that when you comes to this pure intelligence, machine power, these things will have more power, and as opposed to they can still be an AI, but they will not be artificial intelligence. They would be calling humans AI, which is going to be ancient intelligence, right?
That's a good point.
Who cares? It's like an ant, right? Or ant intelligence for that matter.
Right.
So if you take that concept further, you're saying is that, look, we as humans are very limited in our capacity, right? So do you want to take all those limitations of humans, right? Humans see a very small wavelength of light.
Right.
We hear very small wavelength of sound, and we process very small bit of information. So to some extent, the reality of the world that we see as a species is not real. It is simply based on very species specific. We don't hear what dogs can hear.
Right.
We don't see what bats can see. So my point is, but we think the world that we see as humans is the real world and everything else is fake. But is it quite possible that we really never see the real world? The real world is a Taylor Swift playing here that we don't hear it here. So when we say that humans see reality because we see it, we believe it, we are just we are seeing through an interface which is very, very crude, designed for our own survival.
That's a really good point, and I was having a conversation with a couple friends recently. It's we think about the human brain, right? It's almost as reality evolved faster than the human brain itself, because we still have, to your point, these very animalistic traits to us, right? And what we got out of this entire process was the prefrontal cortex. But, thinking about this trajectory, right? What comes after the prefrontal cortex, and perhaps does it give us some additional awareness than what we have today, right? So, maybe we're just looking at this like one lane of sight that we can see, but beyond that, who knows, right?
I mean, my point is, if a small amount of neocortex gave us so much ability to become the top of the species chain, and if you can really have a brain-computer interface where you have unlimited amount of neocortex, would that species will essentially make humans obsolete?
That's a really good point. Not only would it make potentially humans obsolete, but also there's a philosophical question in there in regards to, do we no longer become humans to a certain extent? Because I think, a lot of the perhaps archaic components of the human brain that give us this gut feeling, give us emotion, and the way to really feel the world, if we have more access to data and the computational power to crunch that, are those things still useful, right? Perhaps, those things were useful in the sense that there's so much data and humans could not comprehend it, with their own, mental capacity today that we have. That's why we have a gut feeling, right? Because we simply cannot compute all of this, right? So if we sort of begin and continue to augment the human brain more so than we already have, I mean, we have smartphones today. Elon Musk is looking at, brain to human interfaces.
Brain to computer interface.
Brain to computer interfaces. Yeah. What do you think about that in regards to, are we still human at that point?
Well, to be human is really about our experiences and our memories. Everything else actually is constantly changing and dying, right? Our skin is changing. We are constantly a different human being today than we were yesterday. Or one could argue even a minute before I said this, I was a different person than I am right now. So, to an extent, the only reason people think I'm still the same person is because my memories and experience haven't changed, right? People somehow have this limitations of human being can be only one place at one time. There is absolutely no reason if we can connect our brain to some other sensors that could be in multiple places at the same time, providing in sync information. Our brain would not know the difference where I am here, or in all the same places at the same time. And one could even, you start to think about that perspective. It is not that we have to see more things that are real. The fact is humans don't have to, because humans are designed for one purpose only: survival and procreation. I don't need to see the energy here. I don't need to see the wavelights here. I don't need to even see the dark matter here, because it doesn't matter to my survival. The fact I think this glass exists, it actually may not even exist. It's simply the creation of my interface that I see. The fact I touch and I feel the pressure, that may all be the just tactile pressure I'm feeling, and there may nothing be here.
Right, they're just electrical signals in the brain, right? So
what we don't know what real is. When if you don't know what real is, then how do you say something is artificial when our reality is artificial?
Maybe it's just a good marketing term for it then, perhaps, right? But that poses serious questions about, what we're building today and, what the purpose and value of that is for the long term. And it's really interesting because, I think we're going through this unprecedented period of change right now when we think about the fourth industrial revolution, and your company Viome is certainly, merging that gap between the biological, physical, and software world. In a similar case, what we're building with conversational AI is another building block, right? It's beginning to fuse all these data points that before weren't connected, and we're sort of putting those pieces together. And where does that take us, perhaps to this ambient computing reality that we're getting to within the near future here? So, AI being just one component of it.
Of course.
But it's certainly, we're continuing to build that value as we continue to walk down this trail.
Well, I mean, the part of it is that our way we communicate with other humans is evolved for very simple reasons. And one could argue that we could extend the interface we talk from humans to humans, from humans to computers, and to some extent then computers become this part of their extended humanity.
Right.
So they will not be just 8-9 billion of us, there'll be trillions of us, because all computers, we communicate exactly the same way. They communicate with us like other humans, and now we have extended the human species. And we could potentially believe that these human species don't ever die, because their experience and memories will live forever. And that means, have we now created another human? They may look or may not look like us, but they never die. So now we have created essentially fountain of youth that these robots are, that behave like humans, act like humans, and they may someday even be you. That means they have learned everything from you by watching you, the way you act, the way you talk, everything you know. They have analyzed every audio, video that I have produced. And someday they can create an avatar that is just like me, a holographic image that nobody will know the difference. So have I now lived, am I living forever?
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, because I think today what we're seeing is the building blocks are there. So there's companies like Soul Machines that are building the avatars, the digital avatars, in conjunction with conversational AI. But it's far, it's very in this like initial stage from where you're talking about this future where we could potentially upload our mental cognition and our entire experience.
But you don't even have to upload it. My point is, even without uploading it, the people are creating so much content on a social media.
Right.
And if somebody were to just simply take all of that you can mimic that person more or less about who that person is.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, especially with the stuff we saw about Cambridge Analytica. I mean, like they were saying they had so many data points, they could predict things about someone's spouse better than the person's spouse.
Yeah.
So you're certainly right about that.
Well, Chad, as we go towards this future, what are you excited about and what are you scared of?
Sure. I'm excited about just being alive in this period of so much information, the commoditization of storage network compute, all of this data and just the accessibility, right? By trade, I'm not a programmer, right? I know a lot of programmers. I talk to a lot of them, but I'm not a programmer. And for me to be able to coexist within this ecosystem and be able to put ideas together and meet with people of, from 6,000, 3,000 miles away, and to be able to collaborate on these projects, I think that's really exciting, and I think it doesn't matter what your background is, where you come from. Anyone can, look at the technology today, get access to education and begin to collaborate with people around the world. And I think that's really exciting. Something I'm scared of is, I too believe that, the mission of just the human species is to simply persist, right? And, we just look at all of these different probabilities of things that could happen. We see a lot of geopolitical turmoil and social turmoil and financial turmoil. And, we begin to sort of think about where could humanity fall off the ledge, unfortunately, and, for me and what I'm building and what I'm focused on creating, I want to do what I can today to make sure to increase the probability that we can, continue to exist into the millennia.
Well, Chad, it's been an absolute pleasure having you as a guest, and I look forward to having you back again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.